Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome, wherever you may be, to the second webinar designed to share the experiences that we have had over the last couple of months on estates and estate businesses. My suggestion is that we submit questions, or you submit questions as we go through the various presentations, and unless there's something which is really pressing and relevant to one of the talks which has just happened, we will deal with the questions at the end. The aim of today is to focus on estates with a public-facing element in their business. Katie Delafield, Sam Coles, and John Coates will do that initially, but followed by David Slack, the Managing Director of the Yassenden Estate in Berkshire, a very diverse rural estate on the M4 corridor. Just before that, I thought I'd share with you some comments from some conversations I've had with my old friend and client, Tom Blofeld. Tom is the owner and creator of the Bewilderwood theme parks in Norfolk and Cheshire, where the second one was due to open earlier this year. It's Tom's view that tourism, and I would wholeheartedly agree with this, is a vital industry within the UK, equally vital in the rural communities as it is in London, Bath, Cambridge or York, or the well-known urban tourist centres. It is all, as many businesses are, very short of cash. And not only will it be short of cash, but it's lost its spring and summer season. And we don't really know what sort of season might be left this summer. The last paying child, Tom tells me, at Bewilderwood in Norfolk, exited the park at the end of half term October 2019, a long time ago. Many of the enterprises are small scale, but all part of the rural fabric that keeps the rural economy afloat in our respective areas. The man with his ice cream van, the local tea rooms, the craft centres, the bed and breakfast accommodation, small farm parks, all the way through to the centre parks at Elvedon and elsewhere in the country and Alton Towers. They're all very short of cash, and they're all part of UK Tourism PLC. And it's Tom's view that he will expect many of those not to come back. Many won't come back for pure financial reasons, but he's in touch with a couple of his friends who started enterprises as their second career, who were seeking an alternative lifestyle, just as Tom did with Bewilderwood. And he says that if it wasn't part of his bigger estate, he probably wouldn't have the appetite, the energy, or probably the capital now to start it up again. And his concern is that a number of people in his position won't. And if they're on businesses, involved with businesses like the ones we're engaged with, that will create a void for all of our clients and for your estates. Those that do get through, however, will benefit. It's how we achieve that, and that's what we're focusing on with clients at the moment that are exposed to this particular sector. As of today, ironically, I had a call from an estate in Norfolk where my colleague John Coates, who's going to speak shortly, is also engaged. And they have a 950 pitch caravan site, a go-kart centre, a small-scale hotel, a let shoot, and they've said we've got to start looking at different models that will enable these enterprises, with our help, to get back to some form of normality, maybe de-risking some of the in-hand ones at the same time. So enough from me. I'm now going to pass over to Katie Delafield, who will examine the experiences that she's had on an estate that was heavily exposed to the retail, restaurant and leisure sector. So enough from me, and over to you, Katie. Thank you.
Thank you, James. So with lockdown starting a week before most commercial tenants were due to pay their March quarter's rent, it was not surprising that most businesses have struggled to pay, particularly those in the retail and restaurant sectors. The good news is that as of yesterday, shops were able to reopen and people were clearly shopping. However, restaurants are still closed until at least the 4th of July, and it will be some time before they're able to run at full capacity again. Although if the government do reduce the social distancing rules to 1 metre, this could help increase revenue potential for restaurants from about 30% to 75%. And from speaking to restaurant businesses, this will be extremely helpful to allow them to reopen next month. With this in mind, the June quarter is going to be even more of a challenge for us to get cash in for our clients. So what options have been available for our clients? Well, without the option to serve a statutory demand or to rely on forfeiture between March and June, tenants have been in the driving seat of all negotiations. However, they are contractually obliged to pay their rent under the terms of the lease, so it is important that they do so at some stage. It is worth noting that this restriction on what landlords can and can't do may be extended by further legislation. And there's currently a landlord and tenant code that's being consulted on at the moment that could extend this way into next year. Despite this, we've found that most tenants have accepted that they have to pay at some stage, and by regularly keeping in touch with them and coming up with appropriate payment plans, we've been successful at getting money in for our clients. Not only has this process strengthened our landlord and tenant relationships, it's also meant that we've been able to support local businesses through this challenging period. It's not necessarily been smooth in all cases, as there are always those tenants who will not cooperate in paying their rent or agree to any payment plans, for which the only real options have been to pursue the rent deposits or guarantors. Whilst our overall aim has been and still is to keep tenants, there are always those that it doesn't work out for, and in these situations we've been able to action break clauses or to negotiate early surrenders. If the code does get released, these may be our only options for the next 12 months. As it's going to be some time before businesses are back to normal, we'd recommend in all cases to try and keep those good tenants where possible and work with them for longer term gain. So what payment plans have we agreed? Well, we've treated each tenant's request on a case-by-case basis and continue to do so. We consider their business structure, their user type, and what government initiatives have been available to them. We initially started by agreeing monthly repayment plans to help with cash flow, and this was accepted by most tenants. For those that were unable to pay anything, such as those restaurants, we have agreed to interest-free rent deferrals for fixed periods. With the June quarter around the corner, we've only just started to agree to discounts, as most tenants will have benefited from some form of government initiative to help with the March quarter's rent. Such initiatives are not being released again for June. So what government help has there been and what's still out there? Well, one thing that's been most helpful is the business rate holiday for retail, hospitality and leisure sectors. The government has also extended this to childcare providers such as children's nurseries, which most of us have on the estates we manage. We are hoping that landlords will also benefit from business rate help by having an empty rates holiday for the same period. We're waiting to hear more information about this. Another scheme that's been hugely helpful has been the Retail, Hospitality and Leisure Grant Fund, where most businesses in this sector were able to apply for a grant of between £10,000 and £25,000 depending on their rateable value. In most cases, this was used to pay all of the March quarter's rent, if not part. There is also now a local business grant scheme, which is a discretionary fund set up for certain small businesses previously outside the scope of this other grant, and grants are available for up to £25,000. The allocation of the funding is at the discretion of a local authority. The only criteria we're aware of is that businesses must be small, they must have employees of less than 50 people, and they must be able to demonstrate that they've had a loss of income due to COVID-19. This is certainly something worth looking into if not already. There are also various other schemes such as deferring VAT payments and government-backed loans, which we're all aware of. So what's happening in the market? Well, whilst there's a great concern about the impact on the retail and hospitality and leisure sectors, we are starting to see a bit of light, and as a result there is some movement. I hope that this will be boosted further by the consumer confidence that we saw yesterday. We're agreeing lease renewals and new lettings, and our aim is to try and keep the rents at the same level pre-COVID-19, but we are having to offer greater rent-free periods as an incentive to renew. I'm aiming to agree this is personal and confidential to tenants. If tenants are unable to commit to renewals, we're looking to roll forward deals by circa 12 months, by which time we hope to be in stronger negotiating positions. So in summary, the next 6 to 12 months is going to be challenging, and we're going to have to continue to work with our existing tenants to keep our commercial properties let and income coming in for our clients. Thank you.
Katie, thank you very much indeed. Questions to Katie, do get them coming in as we now move on to Sam Coles. Sam will now look at how one of his clients has taken a bold move and taken advantage of this extraordinary situation to advance the changing attitudes of the next generation away from the traditional landlord and tenant relationship to a more engaging, public-facing estate model. Sam, over to you.
Thank you very much, James. So I'm going to run over the experiences of one estate that I'm looking after in particular. And although unique to them, the thinking and processes may all be applicable to where you are. So giving a little background and context, it was a traditional farming estate in Cambridgeshire that has developed into a more mixed estate with income roughly split a third between commercial, agricultural and residential. And although they have a significant in-hand farming business, everything else is covered by a landlord-tenant relationship. So as with most of you, there has been pressures on tenant rents in the last 3 months, and as Katie just pointed out, particularly on the commercial side. So my example, at the start of the year, we were negotiating for the early surrender of the pub on the estate. So the pub sits in the middle of the village. It's a charming thatched listed property. And the surrender negotiations were started by the tenant who had a wish to leave for a number of personal reasons. But as James said, this then sparked a desire in the estate and the estate owners to run the pub in hand in the future. So the lease itself had a few years left to run. So when the virus hit at the start of March, we had a decision. Do we stop with the negotiations and fall back to the guaranteed income from the lease? Or do we push on, agree a surrender and work the situation to our advantage? So I think in a lot of cases, negotiations would have stopped and we would have waited to see what happens over the course of the next 6 months, particularly bearing in mind the impact that the virus is and will be having on the hospitality industry. So after quite a few discussions and phone calls, it was really encouraging that the estate outlined that this decision to take back the pub and run it in hand was a long-term goal and hopefully spanning timescales far in advance of any effects of COVID-19. So we proceeded with completing the surrender, which wasn't altogether straightforward. It involved TUPEing staff, it involved ending all the contracts that the previous occupier had, licensing issues, alcohol issues with the council. So as I've just alluded to and what Katie touched on, the hospitality industry has been one of the hardest hit sectors. But with lockdown and closure, this has meant that we can complete the surrender and take over the pub when it would have to be closed anyway. So in any previous years, and hopefully future years to come, taking on a pub in April, May would have been at the start of the busy season, which would have been quite a daunting prospect for the estate and us. So with enforced closure, that has meant that they can invest in the building, they can make changes, they can carefully think about the staffing and management structures, whilst also having no pressures from customers. The estate also gladly received support by means of the government furlough schemes for the staff that were transferred over, and also other government loans that were available to businesses. So reopening the pub and any other businesses is obviously hugely important to this estate and to you all. So getting income back to normal or near to is of high importance. And as we've all seen in the news, there is the possibility pubs might be open in some form on the 4th of July, all fingers crossed. But this will come too soon in my example, and we'll be looking to reopen in August. So what we've done, we have highlighted both generally and for this property in particular, it is really crucial to get the confidence of the customer when it comes to dealing with the virus, whether that's zoning, social distancing, cleaning regimes, whatever it is, getting community confidence that the business is adhering to regulations and industry standards is really paramount. So we've said that social media will have a big part to play in this. You can put an update on social media far more quickly than you can print it or even on the internet. But this also is a danger. So social media can very quickly highlight to customers if businesses aren't operating safely or in line with regulations and standards. So a couple of take-home messages. As I said at the start, the estate was traditionally a landlord-tenant estate. but with the influence from next generation and running summer businesses in hand, like the pub, the reliance on income from tenants will reduce, moving the estate slightly away from the landlord-tenant model and bringing in a slightly more business owner, entrepreneur and customer feel and relationship. However, income from tenants will always be incredibly important, but this just varies the income sources a little further, which should be encouraged in the running of any estate. So, and finally, the pub was highlighted as a core property to the estate. It really is a heartbeat and a bit of a magnet to the community and a heartbeat of the estate. So this is one where they really want to encourage public engagements and visits. And in the past, under all the various leasehold arrangements, they haven't had the control that they may have wished they had on the property and of the occupying businesses. So bringing it back in hand, although a slightly riskier option, has been a positive move, listening to the wishes of the next generation and hopefully moving the story forward in the success of their estate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sam. A really positive story coming out there. What you haven't told everybody is that you're now fully trained up to be behind the bar at a moment's notice as well. So we look forward to sharing a pint there after the 4th of July or after the 4th of August. So thank you, Sam. We'll now pass over, I hope, to John Coates, who will consider what John's been doing, in my opinion, rather imaginatively and with a great deal of tenacity to help clients, in this case in Norfolk and Suffolk, two counties with a very high dependency on the tourism sector. And as a consequence, a number of John's clients are heavily exposed to those, the downfalls that we've seen over the last couple of months, and how we're going to ensure that they're as protected as they can be. John, over to you.
Thanks, James. I deal with, as James says, a number of rural estates across East Anglia, and almost without exception, they'll have some form of income stream linked to the leisure and tourism sector, whether that might just be a cottage used for short-term holiday lets, a let shoot, or something larger like an in-hand boating lake or caravan park, such as the one James mentioned. Every one of these enterprises has been impacted by the restrictions introduced by the government to try and control COVID-19 at a time when minimal rainfall is likely to result in reduced yields and income from their traditional business. It's been a great disappointment for these clients that they've been unable to open up the side of their business which actually would prosper from the day after day of blue skies we've enjoyed. The more directly involved with the leisure tourism business that they are, the greater the impact that they've had, and in most cases actually where my client acts as a landlord and derives rent from the leisure or tourism business are scale, albeit we may have discussed the possibility of that happening with the landlord, or certainly we have, and maybe in discussions with the tenant and planning our budgets accordingly. For those clients who are the owner-operators of the tourism leisure business, the first thing to say is that their present situation would have been far worse, but for Mr. Sunak's truly remarkable package of assistance, nearly all of which we've taken with both hands. You will know here that I'm talking about sort of four main areas: the furlough scheme, the business rates holiday, package of loans available, and the business interruption grants of £10,000 for businesses with the rateable value of less than £15,000 and 25 grand for businesses with a rateable value of more than £15,000. And suddenly one of my clients wasn't quite so appreciative of the work I'd done to get their business rates valuation reduced by 9 a couple of years ago. The only one of those four that are of having relatively strong cash positions and reasonably low fixed costs, providing thanks to the government schemes, and the other reason being that when things return to normal, it's simply not the case that with the help of a cash injection we're going to be able to increase our output and make back the income we've foregone during the lockdown period. There are only so many boats you can put on a mere before you run out of space, and a wedding business is limited by the days in the year. We can have a strong 2021, but you can't get 2 years into one, unfortunately. That all being said, for some of my clients that may not have easy access to money from the banks, but have small projects that they're already considering and need some extra funding for, I am doing some work on potential projects for which we may now try to use some of these government-backed loans to at least part finance them. For instance, the conversion of some barns into holiday lets, with a view to perhaps exploiting a potential boom in staycations that might follow all of this. Alongside our eagerness to make most of the government's generous, some might say lavish, approach to financial support, we have sought to claim through the relevant insurance policies for loss of income, and where that has failed, or at least not got anywhere straight away, we have done the next best thing by recovering any insurance premium that was paid out on a pro rata basis for activities we are no longer able to provide. On the whole, I think the prevailing view, and mine, is that things will return to some kind of normal in the not too distant future, although it might be too late for this summer. And there, depending on when we get back online, there may be a small boom in business within the UK leisure and tourism sector. But as I say, that will depend on when we can get going again. Businesses have to be ready to go at that time, or they're going to miss opportunities. We know that some won't be around, and that creates opportunities for those that will be. And for our clients, this means that we've done things like produce a risk assessment for the boating lake that we help with, and now working towards getting that business back up and running in the very near future, in line with the various rules and regulations, which is going to mean they're probably only operating at 50%, but it's better than nothing. In other cases where a client is operating a wedding venue business, we've been working with them to be as flexible as they can be, encouraging customers to wait and see, with the promise that they will be able to cancel their booking without penalty, or leave their deposit in place and rebook for 12 months hence. It's a policy that's worked, and they haven't lost many bookings, and indeed they've actually picked up some from other operators who aren't being as pragmatic. And we've also penciled in mid-July as a day when cottages might be available for short-term lets again, and if that doesn't end up being the case, we'll just keep pushing that out. But it seems like mid-July is a kind of a time that people are tending to work to within the industry now. Thanks very much.
Thank you, John, very much. Sorry about the technical problems. We were lucky to get away with none last time, so it's inevitable we'll have a couple this time. But thank you, John, for persevering. I've got one question, which I think we might just take before I reintroduce David, from Mark Robbins to, I think, Casey Delafield. Casey, Mark has asked, what is the time frame on publishing the expected code? Can you elaborate on that, perhaps just briefly?
So there's no confirmed date when it will be released, but it's in draft form at the moment, so it's being consulted on, and so hopefully we'll know more in the next few weeks. So I am monitoring it, so I can let you know, Mark, by email when more information comes out, if that would be helpful.
Okay, Casey, thank you for that. There are some other questions which we'll come to, but do keep them coming. David Slack, I've already introduced, no more introduction, but David, a thank you for coming to share your experiences from the coalface at Yassenden, and we look forward to hearing what you've been up to over the last couple of months on that beautiful estate.
Thank you, James, and good afternoon, everybody. Well, for all of us, I think it's been a very interesting few months. I don't think any of us have ever lived through anything quite like this, so a lot of what we're doing has been learning on the hoof. But as I say, what doesn't break you makes you stronger. Starting with the commercial portfolio, here at Yassenden, we've got around 41 commercial tenants. And of those, probably about 30 have required some type of help, mostly through rent deferral. We specifically kept away from referring to as a rent holiday, but a rent deferral. We have, in some cases, used rent deposits. We've also been trying to help with finding the grant funding for some of our tenants. And I think in line with most people, we are dealing with all of these on a case-by-case basis. The hardest hit, as you've already heard this afternoon, the food and beverage sector. We have a number of businesses that have a catering operation. Their work fell off a cliff. There are no parties, weddings, whatever happening, so they probably won't get started in any way, shape or form this year. Hairdresser, we've had to deal with the fallout from obviously that type of business. You may know we've got a famous party business here, Party Pieces. Well, nobody's having children's parties at the moment, so that business is somewhat restricted, even with the connections. We've got two pub hotels that we are landlords for, and in line with the tenants where we have turnover rent, so we have a stake in both the Royal Oak Hotel and the Popkill. Frustratingly, we've just made major investments in both of the buildings by increasing in one the number of bedrooms, putting a new kitchen and new dining room in both of them. And just as soon as we had finished, certainly with the Popkill, lockdown came and the whole thing's been mothballed. So we're now working with them on a recovery strategy. And I think the 4th of July, a number of people have banded is a date that we can start to trade. But I think in reality, it's probably going to be August before we get anywhere near semblance of trading. The other business that has been somewhat hit is the West Berkshire Brewery. They are our largest tenant. About 4 years ago, we closed our loss-making dairy and turned it into, well, it's a microbrewery, but you would be forgiven for thinking it's actually a super brewery if you went there, with a restaurant and a bar. And they have changed their operation, and I think the visitor centre stroke takeout food will be reopening shortly, but it will be some time before we can have the brewery tours that they are known for. But all these businesses we are supporting as best we can. I think there have been a number of winners through this issue. The village store and post office, which we took back in hand about 4 years ago, has gone from strength to strength. For the months of April and May, month on month, we've traded in excess of 113% increase in turnover, which is a great news story. Again, we've had to learn how to manage that business with social distancing. We have the wine man. Well, in Yattendon, when things get really bad, everybody hits the bottle. And so the wine man has done exceptionally well. He's probably had his best trading ever. The pharmaceuticals will do well in hangover remedies following that, I should imagine. Vickers Game has done very well, our game dealer on the estate, with the takeout menu and barbecue packs. He's done extraordinarily well. And then another winner is the Velospeed electric bikes. Everybody seems to have got on their bike in the crisis and be exercising. So whilst we a few months ago may have been chortling at spending £4,000 or £5,000 on an electric bike, he's the one laughing because he's sold a shed load of bikes. On the residential side, we've only had 2 hardship cases out of 176 residential tenants, so that's very positive. Farming, business as usual. Thankfully, we've had a bit of rain, we've got some more coming, so the farming is doing okay. Christmas trees, we are gearing up because after the lockdown, our view is that everybody's going to want to celebrate Christmas with a lovely, fresh, natural tree from Yattendon Estate. So the Christmas business is up and running. And the shoot, we've taken the view that a lot of estates aren't shooting this year. So we'll capitalise on that, and we have a full order book, and we are fully let and shooting our 50 odd days this year. Now, the big winner for me has been the community support we've been able to engender through this crisis. We've used the village store as the hub of the community. We set up a COVID-19 Facebook page for information, and we set up a WhatsApp group of volunteers. And we've got about 25 local people who volunteer, and they have been collecting prescriptions from various surgeries and delivering them throughout the area, and also delivering food, groceries, and other essentials to those in isolation, those who are shielding, and the elderly and infirm who can't get out. So for me, this has been probably the biggest positive of the whole lockdown, is that the estate can rise up to the challenge and prove its worth to the community. And I think, and it has been widely said by the community, we've been the bedrock in this whole crisis of keeping it all together, and we've had a real opportunity to shine. So I think, James, that's a canter through Yattendon, but essentially it's positive, and we are helping in those areas where we need to on the commercial side. But otherwise, the other facets of the building, other facets of the business seem to be performing pretty well.
David, thank you very much. I'm particularly interested to hear that, you know, the cottages that you have so many of have fared fairly well, which is positive. It may be a reflection of geographically where you are as much as anything else. I look forward to coming back to the brewery. I think that's a great establishment there. I've enjoyed that on a number of occasions. I suppose a question to you just to kick off is, you know, do you think that local authorities might be able to do more in terms of allowing, you know, the Royal Oak to have more seating outside? I know you've got some, but, you know, have you had any discussions around that sort of thing, so that perhaps we can, in the weather we're getting, at least capitalise on getting more people not in the pubs, but enjoying the pubs?
Well, it was pre-COVID that we went and had the conversations with West Berkshire Council in the two main planning, well, the three for our coffee shop, which is the pantry, and the two pubs. The planning permissions that we were granted restricted very much the use of outside space, and we went back at them on 3 occasions and persuaded and negotiated to allow us to use the maximum space. So we are already maxed out on all of the garden usage. If we hadn't done that and we had stuck with the planning that came, we would now be going back to them and asking for a review. But we've got the maximum amount of space in use at the moment. And that's now going to be critical for refloating these businesses.
Yeah, thank you, David. The other question that I've got coming in for you, David, is from Giles Patterson. David, are you concerned that the pre-planning and expense of going ahead with the shoot may be wasted if social distancing measures remain in place for the foreseeable?
Okay, as you know, on estates, some of the decisions that are made are perhaps not made on a purely business rationale. The estate is very much part of the family's control. So we had the conversation. I went to the family with all the financials and said, if this doesn't happen, could you stomach losing X? And it's quite a chunky X. And the family's view were, we want to shoot, we want to take the risk, we're prepared to take the risk. So although it doesn't follow the normal business parameters, we want you to continue as though nothing had gone wrong. So that's exactly what we're doing. So it's very much a heart over a head decision.
David, thank you. One other question I've got for you, David, is you've just alluded to the fact that your estate has been the hub of a lot of the support network that's evaporated out from the estate to the surrounding communities. To me, this is a great opportunity for rural estates to do just that and to regain some of the credentials that they had historically around that sort of structure. How do you think we're going to need to keep this going? Because this COVID will ebb away, it will always probably be hanging over us, but we've got such an opportunity here to maintain that profile and the really positive PR which has come out of it. Such an opportunity. How are we going to keep it?
Yeah. So I've been very aware that we haven't been doing enough on social media. and in publications. We're a very private estate, and we've always kept a very private persona. But all of the successes and the opportunities, we have been using Facebook, we have been using Instagram, lots of other social media platforms, as well as the local magazines, to publicise what we're doing and why we're doing it. And we're also ensuring that going forward, the changes we've made to the way we say run the village store and the post office continue, so that people know that they have a safe place to shop, because this isn't going away anytime soon. And when I took a straw poll of our people shopping, they said that they continue to come here because our prices are pretty much in line with the supermarket. They don't have to travel. They don't have to queue to get in like you do in a supermarket. And they just feel that it's a safer place to shop. And I think we needed this really to make the community realise just what a great asset our facilities such as the schools and post office. So time will tell, but I think the loyalty will be paid back because the amount of work and effort that we've gone in to engage, and we will continue to engage with our community.
Thank you, David. Questions coming from Tom White. David, again to you. Sorry, in the firing line a bit at the moment. We'll divert it off you in a second. Have you taken non-returnable deposits for your shooting?
We haven't. No, we haven't. We've taken. Sorry, we have. Sorry, they are non-refundable deposits, and we've said to those who've taken the shooting that whilst they've got other insurances, we cannot guarantee about COVID-19 and distancing. We will do what we can do, and I think we've got enough vehicles, and we've replanned the shoot in the way that we move our beaters and our guns around, that we shouldn't have an issue. Obviously, if the spacing goes down to 1 metre from 2, then that's going to make life a lot easier. But we've taken the view that there is no reason why, through spacing, we cannot run the shoot.
Thank you, David. Sam, question for you, I think, here, because it's very much aligned with what you've done. Do you think the impact of C19 will mean that estates such as the one you spoke about will take more hospitality businesses back in hand because they consider they might go bust if they didn't? Or will they actually be more nervous of running in-hand businesses? And I think a lot of this comes down to the skill sets which are available. Would you like to just elaborate on that?
Yeah, thanks, James. I think, first of all, there will be opportunities. Leases are getting surrendered. Tenancies are coming back in hand and properties are coming back in hand. It's then for the estate to make that decision on whether they think running a business in hand is a good move. In the case I was referring to, it tied in really well with generational changes, and the property itself lended itself brilliantly to be controlled by the estate directly. I think that therefore it just has to be a decision. There will always be commercial tenants wanting to take on leases, and a good business before COVID is still going to be a good business after COVID. So I think that's quite an important point to realise as well. Commercial tenants may be in trouble at the moment, but if they were doing well late last year in 2019, then with a little support, hopefully they will be coming back in 2020 as well. So yeah, I think there will be opportunities, and estates should treat it on a case-by-case basis, and if they want to do it, then they should go for it.
Thank you, Sam. One for David and Katie, really. Maybe we'll go to Katie first and then jump over to you, David. There's been a question here, what else could the government be doing to help UK leisure and tourism sector? And I would add in there the restaurants and so forth sector. Katie, we're obviously going out for dinner and sitting between two plastic screens is not what most people think about. But obviously removing 2 meters would help. What else could the government be doing, do you think, to help those estates which we've been talking about? And Katie, yours was very heavily exposed in one instance.
I think the 2 meter rule is critical. Reducing that to 1 meter. Restaurants, I think they need to be at sort of 75% capacity to actually make them viable to reopen. I know there was a question about outside seating, so I think that will help if they can serve outside. However, that will be limited on space and also the weather. So I think the government, whether they could make more grants available or come up with more initiatives like they did in March to help support the restaurant businesses. I think it's going to take at least 6 months, if not 12 months, for them to sort of be back to normal. So I think it's going to be quite a challenge for the next 12 months. So I think government support is essential.
Thank you, Katie. David, do you want to add anything to that? Because you've obviously exposed in a number of ways there.
Yeah, two things really. The first is, as a landlord, it's made us look at our mix of tenants, and we have got too many who are in the food, beverage, hospitality, and so, you know, do we need to be a little bit more choosy in our tenant mix to protect us for the future? Heaven forbid this sort of thing should ever happen again. As Katie absolutely said, the spacing rule is critical for this. That has to go down to a metre, and there has to be more grant funding, because it's the tourism and the leisure and the hospitality sector that is going to be the last to get back on their feet. I think everybody else generally can do it, but those businesses, critical. I, as you may know, work on a steam railway as well, and in Yorkshire, and they've got the same difficulty, because you've got to have a certain critical mass on a tourism venture or in a restaurant, hotel. You've got to have a critical mass to pay the bills and make the whole thing work. And at the moment, with the spacing issues, you just cannot make that critical mass. So the government will need to make further grant funding available specifically for these sectors.
Thank you, David. An interesting question from Alexander George. Thank you, Alexander. David, and I'd also like to push this one over to John Coates, who I know has got a project which is relevant. David, do you anticipate any rent increases for new lets for rural office space, especially with high-speed internet connections? And I might add to this an angle to that question being, do we think that some of the planning permissions which we're going to be pushing forward, John, perhaps would benefit from a greater element of working environment within the what is otherwise a residential consent? So David, first off.
Yeah, absolutely. This is something we've been really looking at, is to create a working hub like a Regis office, which we would operate as a serviced office, and there's a shared boardroom and a number of rooms, and so you hire a room by the week, by the month, whatever, and you then have a share of the bookable facilities. I think people are not wanting to travel now as much as they did. They're not wanting to get on the train and go to London, let alone fly. So, and I think also through this lockdown, those of us who have smaller children have realised that trying to work and smaller children don't necessarily go together particularly well. So there needs to be somewhere that one can go to easily, locally, to work and to share facilities that doesn't involve getting on a train or a plane.
John, do you want to add something there?
Yes, yeah, I totally agree. I think as a result of people having to work at home, there is going to be a greater market for it once we come out of this. People, well, some people apparently enjoy it, so they're going to want to do it more. I think for businesses, it makes financial sense. If you can do it, why wouldn't you try and force some of your workforce to work from home and encourage that? And I think it fits with the way the world is going. But it comes down to the same old thing that I think we've been harping on about for, well, since ever I've known about it, is broadband speeds in rural areas. Until they get on top of that, and I think this should be a real drive out the back of this, is, you know, if you can't, as you've seen today, I can't work on the internet today, and I'm in Norwich. So if you haven't got that service, none of the rest of it stacks up. But if you can do that, I totally agree. Yeah, people want to work outside of the cities more and more, and I think this is going to speed it up, if anything.
And we've got a good question here from Robert Childerhouse, Robert up in Yorkshire. Taking both the COVID-19 impact and the farm subsidy changes coming in the next 2 years or so, are there any signs of tenant farmers exiting the sector, i.e. those who have perhaps unstable farms on an AHE or older with no succession? I might take that one to start with. Robert, it's an interesting question, and I've just started discussions with a tenant who is on a 350-acre unit, largely a livestock unit, and the soil quality is poor, the buildings are not great, and the house is very big. And what we're doing there is a partial exit. In a way, we're taking him out of the farmhouse to start with, to help in a reduction of the rent and to be able to give a better rent stream after investment to the estate. And it was only last week, when we were talking about the documents relating to that, that the first inkling I got of actually, I'm wondering about my future. It was a disastrous winter for him, wet as anything, rain water running out of the side of the hills, and it's now turned into an equally disastrous spring because he's got no forage for the cattle. He's 72, he's only got to be kicked by a cow once and that'll be it. And so I think he is starting to think, and I think people in that sector and of that age group, perhaps with no succession as you allude to, will start to think that maybe the time has come. I wouldn't say we're seeing a rush of it. Sam, you I know have just had a couple of sales of pieces of land where tenants have given up. So perhaps you might give your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I agree with you, James. I think BPS will have a bigger impact in the long run than COVID, just because it's hopefully working on longer timescales. I think initially we may actually see a pressure on rents, and not many of us have had rent review notices served by tenants or been serving them as landlords. So I think initially that may be a push, whether it's serving them for this autumn or autumn 2021 rent reviews. Thereafter, I think we've seen quite a few, and James can probably push on this a bit more, but farmland has been coming on the market quite a lot. And whether that has been because tenants are leaving and it's the decision to sell, then James can probably help. But I've seen a couple of tenants give up, and estates have decided to put the properties on the market. So yeah, we are seeing it slightly.
Thank you, Sam, very much. I would echo that. We're not seeing a flood. Many of the farms that have come to the market this year are for other reasons. I'm not aware, in East Anglia anyway, so far, of many tenanted farms being surrendered and then coming to the market. Where this has happened on the larger estates, they seem to be taken back in hand into the in-hand farming business, who very often welcome it. But I think times will change, and I think Sam's suggestion around the rents, that will be the first opportunity that they have to try and tweak the landlord's tail. And if that fails, or they don't get the reduction that they need, and I think a lot of this is going to depend upon the banks. And the bank support for the tourism industries that we've been talking about now, or for the tenants in the sector, is going to be very key to their future and what it looks like in 3 or 4 years' time. I think we're nearly at the end of our questions. We've got one final question. It's an in-house question from Giles Dobson, who's sitting quietly in the audience somewhere. And it's really to David for you to give the passing sort of shot on this. Do you think that Yattenden's overall estate strategy looking forward is going to change dramatically in a minor way, or not at all, from the experiences of the last couple of months? And if so, what are the 3 things which you think you would be looking to change?
I think, as I alluded to earlier, tenant mix, certainly on the commercial side, is hugely important, that we look at that. The second thing for me is to ensure that as a community we remain at the centre, and leading and doing what we can. And the third thing actually is a more basic thing, is how we operate this business. We have all had to use these Zoom conferences and this new way of doing business. And I think it's going to mean that we're more flexible. I've got still most of my estate office working from home. It's actually worked. We all thought when it was first proposed that the business would collapse. We couldn't possibly trust our people to work from home. But actually, they're doing just as much, if not more, work from home. We've cut down on a lot of the travelling around. People are more efficient. Actually, I think my staff are probably happier. And I don't have to go on a train as much now to go to London to meetings when we can be like this. So I think embracing the technology would be the third thing.
David, thank you for rounding this afternoon session off like that. I would agree with all of that, and those points are very much echoed within the Bidwell's business. We're all working from home pretty efficiently. Some of us are all working jolly hard because we're in front of a screen that much more. Hopefully we'll start to get out and about and do the things we really enjoy doing as well. So thank you very much to everybody, to Sam, to Katie, to John, and to you, David, for participating today. I hope all of you who I can't see, but I hope are still there, have found it beneficial and enjoyable. And if there are any questions that you want to fire at any of us individually, you know, you're very welcome to do so, and we will come back to you just as soon as we can. And Katie, you haven't forgotten to send that code through when it comes through. So thank you very much indeed. And we look forward to having a similar event at some point in the not too distant future. Have a very good afternoon and look forward to being in touch in a normal way in due course. Thank you.